Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today we're going to take you on a tour of the flowers that are blooming in my yard. Now, I'm sorry about the noise. This is just what happens when you live in a neighborhood with great neighbors. I do love my neighbors. It's just the perfect time of evening to be working on your yard, so you're probably going to be hearing them edging their lawn here for a little while. But anyway, let's show you what's blooming in my front yard first, and then we'll take you to the backyard. So the first place we're going to stop is the only, well, I guess I can't say the only annuals, but they're the only annuals that require very much water in my yard, and this is my potted plants. Now, I have never been really good at potted plants, but I discovered fertilizer. Yes, they do need fertilizer, and when your petunias stop blooming, look for budworms. And we did have an issue with budworms on here, but I sprayed them with BT. And also I noticed the wasps going after them. So now it's absolutely gorgeous. I love it. So we've got some sweet potato vine that's purple, and then some petunias. I'm not exactly sure which variety. So if you want a constant supply of blooms, definitely petunias and annuals are the ones to look for, but they do take quite a bit of water, so I try not to depend on annuals for blooms in my yard. Let me show you what I do. I like to depend on shrubs and perennials and grasses for my color. Now this right here is my summer storm Hearty Hibiscus, and I absolutely love it. Let me show you the size of this bloom compared to my hand. This is my hand. This is the size of the bloom. So these start blooming in August, and they will bloom for quite a while. These are like hibiscus, so this is yesterday's flower. Their flowers only last one day, then they die back, and then they start with new blooms. This will be the bloom for tomorrow. This is obviously today's bloom, and then we've got blooms for days coming. I think they are amazing. They're gorgeous, and I love them, and they bloom this time of year. Now the next one I show you you can't miss is one that everybody knows, well, almost everybody, Black-Eyed Susans. These are another great one for August. These are really hardy, very, very drought tolerant. These are growing in shade and in sun, and they just keep going. The one thing I do need to watch is if the seeds fall on the ground, then they'll take over everything. Some people don't mind. I want mine to kind of stay where they are, so I try to, as soon as they're done blooming, I try to cut all the flowers off. Now down here are two. This one is not one that I would say would bloom in August. It is very much at the end, but it should have been at the end in the spring. Pansies like cool weather. They like moisture. They like shade. But these are in the full sun, went all the way through the heat. This is August. They've hit 100+ days, and they've just been blooming continually. Now the reason I'm leaving them like this to die is I want their seeds to spread all over and just kind of come back in this area. Since they've been so hardy, I really want to keep propagating that. Now another one that I have, and I'm not sure the variety, but this is a sedum. And this has been blooming since June, and I think it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's going to about double the size that it is right now. And we've got one of the horrible elm trees, trash trees in there, so we got to pull that out. So let's look at something else that blooms in August. Look at the color on this. This is a buddleia, or butterfly bush, and this one is a pugster blue. And I love the color on that. There's several different colors, but the blue is my favorite. If you look at the combination of the pugster blue, the summer storm hibiscus, and the beautiful little black-eyed Susans that are poking through, I think that's a gorgeous combination for August. Now here, we have some little wee ones, lavender. And they're pretty much should be done blooming, but if you'll notice, I haven't cut them back, but if you notice, we've got some new blooms coming through. Last year this bloomed all the way through October, unlike all the rest of my lavenders. So I think this is a definite win. They are a smaller bush. They should only get 2 by 2 rather than like the other ones that have gotten, like 4 by 4. So I think the wee one's lavender is great. Okay, what else do we have blooming here? Now this one has struggled a little bit. I'm wondering if it's not getting enough water. This is another pugster butterfly bush, and this one is amethyst. The color is a little bit different than the blue, but I still think it's absolutely gorgeous, and this will bloom through the end of the year. Some more blooms that we're getting still is my chaste tree. This one just continues to pump out the blooms, and I think it is absolutely gorgeous, and the pollinators have loved it. Afterwards, these little seeds, they're medicinal. This is Vitex agnus castus. You know, if you look that up, it's a hormone regulator. I've never used it, but as a herbal, but I think they are absolutely gorgeous plants. And here's a new one for me that I'm just really happy with. And I can't remember the name of the variety, but I bought it from Progressive Plants, and it's a panicle hydrangea. So this one I think is, I just can't remember the name, but if you notice, these white blooms are starting to get tinges of pink around the edges. So as the weather cools and as we get later in the year, these are going to turn pink. And then at the end of the year, they'll just turn brown, and I think they're absolutely gorgeous. As you can see, when they start, they're a little bit chartreuse. Here's one here. In the camera, it looks a little more yellow than it does in real life. So these are some of the flowers that I have blooming in my yard in August. Let's go look at some more. Now this one's looking a little scraggly because I have not cut it back, and I probably should have. But this is my catmint, and if you notice, we've got new blooms forming. If I would have cut this back, this would have all looked fresh, but you know, it's just been a busy year and I haven't done it. So catmint is an absolutely gorgeous plant to have that blooms from April all the way till frost. Catmint is, and I love the blue color, and the pollinators absolutely love this too. Now one annual that just keeps coming back on its own and blooms from early spring till late frost. You know, it reseeds itself, it lives in drought-stricken areas. I have Alyssum, so this is sweet Alyssum. I have Alyssum in areas where I don't think it's getting any water, and they just reseed themselves happily. And because of that, in some areas they're counted as invasive. I know in Southern California they counted these as invasive, but here in Utah, the cold weather and the shorter season seems to limit their spread a little bit. But they just cover all the open areas, and I just let them, and I love it. And we have a few more over here that are blooming. Another one that just comes up on its own when it starts getting cooler is my sweet little Johnny Jump Ups. These just reseed themselves, and if the ground stays wet, they'll reseed themselves just all over the place. If you have a wet spring or wet summer, you'll have them everywhere. But if it's dry, the seeds will just kind of sit there until it gets moist enough, and then you'll have little cute flowers. Another one that I love is my basil. This is purple opal basil, and the flowers are pink, and I think they're absolutely gorgeous. This is another one that's great for pollinators, and I like the dark foliage up against my Glow Girl spirea. Here's some more that bloom in August. We've got our purple coneflower, or echinacea. Our salvia. This is a May night. I've tried digging it up. It just keeps coming back, and I cut it back this year almost to the ground, and it's come back and rebloom. So it blooms in the spring, and then it blooms now. And it looks like the pollinators love it, and so does the bindweed. I need to come pull the bindweed out of it before it sets seed. It looks like it's getting ready to set seed. Then we've got the beautiful little black-eyed Susans just poking their heads through. This is another area here where the sweet Alyssum just comes up all over the place. And it comes up in this area every year, and it very rarely gets any water. So I think they're very drought tolerant. Now here's a new one. This one's starting to close up. This flower is ending its day. It's going to die, and then we're going to get some new ones blooming. But this is another Hearty Hibiscus. This is one that I got as a gift for doing a tour once. And it was a newer variety. It was supposed to be blue. It's not really truly blue. It's just kind of purple with that gorgeous red center. And you've got the cut leaf on it rather than the smooth leaf like my summer storm. And I think it's really, really beautiful. So we've got one other here on this side. This one's also ending its day. We're going to get new ones tomorrow. So I absolutely love Hearty Hibiscus. Now let's head into my backyard here. There's not a ton blooming, but what I'm hoping for is next year to have more flowers. This year was a lot of construction. This is all new as of this spring, so I'm definitely hoping to have more flowers next year. But what we do have is our Hydrangea Macrophylla, which doesn't generally do very well in Utah. I've had these for 10 years and they've done amazing. But one thing that I've noticed is that if we have the early fall freezes, the ones in October before everything goes dormant, then I don't get flowers the next year. Now these do bloom on new wood, so they should have flowered for me, but this one did not, and this is the second year in a row that it didn't flower. Before that, we had 8 years of continuous flowers where these were just completely covered the entire year. So I'm hoping, at least it didn't die, but I'm hoping that we get flowers next year. Now we did get flowers on this one. This one has some really severe iron chlorosis to it. You can see the green veins on it. So I'm going to try chelated iron on it for next year. But this one just had a few blooms. We've got an older one down there. We've got the beautiful pink new one here. And then we've actually got a new bud starting. But as I said, usually these are completely covered in blooms by this time of year. Another one that flowers all year long is Lamium. It's a great ground cover for the shade and for more moist areas. And you have these gorgeous little capped flowers that just happen the entire year. And there's the seed pods from the earlier ones. And I love the variegated foliage with the flowers. It's really pretty. Another great annual for areas where you don't mind giving them extra water is zinnias. I just threw some zinnia seeds in here. It looks like they're getting ready to bloom. Yeah, it's the first time they're blooming this year, but I'm really excited to see them because I think they're absolutely gorgeous. So zinnias will bloom starting, I think, midsummer all the way through the end of the year until the frost kills them. Now back here, being hidden by my massive cucumber vines, look at this. They have completely taken over along with my squash like I showed you in my last video. But if you look through here, pretty soon we're going to get some blooms from my borage. Now borage have gorgeous blue blooms that are edible. They are also annuals and they need a little bit more water. But if they're in your garden bed and they're getting water anyway, I think that's great. Now this is another one that I'm really excited about. I've done another video on maypops. I'll link that at the top. But look what we have up here. Number one, we have one of our maypop flowers that is gonna die, and we may actually get a fruit off this one. This is the first one where that little fruit spot didn't turn completely yellow as it was starting to die back. We'll see what happens. But if you look up here, let's see if we can get a good shot of it. There we go. Isn't he gorgeous? This is a passion flower, or maypop. It's a hardy passion flower. So it's Paciflora Incarnata versus the Paciflora edulis. And I think there's a few more. But isn't it gorgeous? I absolutely love it. And I would love it even more if this little baby turned into a fruit. So this one is perennial. It will die back to the ground every winter, and if you, I'm not sure if you need to protect the roots, but I'm going to anyway, especially this first year, and see if we can get it to come back year after year. I'm also thinking about putting some sort of arbor here. Look at the sunset, isn't that sunset gorgeous? Thinking about putting an arbor here so that it can spread itself over the top. The one thing I'm going to have to watch is my little sprinkler head right there. But the sprinkler points out this way. The grass, I don't know if you've seen my past videos, the grass is starting to come back because of the rain. So that makes me happy. Now, because this area is a garden area, I usually have a lot more annual flowers because of the amount of water that it gets. They're usually in the beds or close to the beds where I don't have to give them extra water. They just get whatever the gardens are getting. But the ones that come up on their own are my little calendulas. I think they're just really cute. This one is a seedling that just popped up from the ones from last year. And I just let these little seeds drop wherever they want to. And then they come up where they can get some moisture. Another one that's starting to rebloom that I really need to deadhead is our Moonshine Yarrow. Look at those pretty yellow blossoms. They bloom early in the spring and then they'll give you a rebloom if you're lucky. This one isn't grown as much for the flowers, but you do get flowers this time of year. This is the winter savory. Isn't he gorgeous? And the bees absolutely love this one also. Now one more that's just ending its bloom, that blooms all the way through June, is my bee balm. So we've got just a few leftover flowers here. Aren't they gorgeous? This one seemed to have multicolored flowers on it. Now I usually have a bunch of annuals up here. I usually have a ton of marigolds, a few cosmos, a lot more calendulas. I even have some nasturtiums sometimes, but because this was a construction year, we didn't plant as many flowers. But there was one flower that I usually never grow on purpose. I weed them out as soon as I see them. But this year I decided to do an experiment, and I'm pretty glad I did. This is a sunflower, and it came up from seed that came from some sunflowers that I grew probably 9 years ago. And it's continuously reseeding itself. I always pull out all the seedlings. I never let it go to seed because I really can't stand trying to dispose of it at the end of the year. If you haven't had, I know a lot of you have had sunflowers, but if you haven't had sunflowers, the stalks are very, very thick. They usually are pretty hard for me to pull up. And then you have to figure out a way to get rid of them. They're really hard to compost. I don't throw them in the compost because the seeds are prolific. A lot of times they're covered in aphids and hornets, sometimes even ants. But because of the aphids, you also get a lot of ladybugs. But this one has not been covered in all the bad stuff. I don't see any ants. I don't see any I don't see any ladybugs, which is kind of sad. But I also don't see any aphids or hornets. So it's been allowed to stay. And this spot right here does not get extra water. I have purposefully not watered it just to see how it would do. And it's never even wilted once. But you get these gorgeous, and look at it against the sunset. Isn't that a gorgeous flower? And the pollinators love it, so it's gonna stay. I'll try to cut off the dead seed heads so that we don't get any more seedlings, a huge, massive amount of more seedlings. But I think it's really great, and it's gonna bloom forever. It feels like, look at all these new buds on it. There's new buds there. We've got a new bud over here. New buds down there. New buds all the way down that stalk. So it's just gonna be happy. It must, I'm wondering if it actually is getting some water, but none of my hoses leak. They're all in the beds. They only run about an hour every other day. So we're not getting a lot of overflow. So I'm not sure why it's so happy. But it gets to stay. Now once you hit August, unless you seriously plant a lot of annuals, there are not a ton of flowers that bloom in August. There might be a few late blooming penstemons, maybe some agastache that will bloom in August. But the best way to get color and texture in August is with foliage color and grasses. And then choose the plants that do bloom this time of year, like the echinacea and the black-eyed Susans and the Hearty Hibiscus. Those are some gorgeous plants. Also plan on definitely having some catmint this time of year because it is also another gorgeous bloomer. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. My next video is going to be a tour of all the herbs that I have in my yard, and we'll discuss a little bit more of what I do with them. In my last video, I talked a little bit about a challenge I heard on YouTube, and it was through Living Traditions Homesteading. I think it's Living Traditions Homestead. She had said that she'd heard about this challenge a year ago, and the challenge is to take something from your yard and use, well, it's actually to preserve it. So the challenge is take something from your yard and preserve it every day. Now, I'm not going to be doing that much preserving because my life is so busy, but what I am going to do is I am going to find something to use every day. So what I used today was the ground cherries, the tomatoes, and the grapes, and that was my lunch for today. Those were from my harvest yesterday. So tomorrow, I am going to actually pickle my peppers, so I will be doing some preserving. So let's see what you can do in your yard, even if it's just picking a flower. Maybe I'll take some of those sunflowers and put them in a vase and have them and enjoy them inside. So I know there's something in your yard that you can use every day to make your life better and happier. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you go have a wonderful garden adventure.